Good evening and welcome to TDM Talk Show. I'm your host, Kelsey Wilhelm. Our guest this evening is Nuno Soares, an architect, urban planner, and acting coordinator of the University of St. Joseph's Department of Architecture. Based in Macau since 2003, Soares has studied the city's urban development and growth, a theme particularly at the forefront given the ongoing public consultation over Macau's urban master plan. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
We have a very important public consultation going on right now over Macau's development for the next 20 years. We're talking 2020 to 2040. And this is the urban master plan. It's under consultation from September 4th until November 2nd, so the public can actually go in and give their opinions on this. I wanted to ask you, they say within this plan, what they're trying to do is create a city that is happy, intelligent, sustainable, and resilient. Do you think that that is going to be achievable through what we have seen so far?
So
it's a big question.
Exactly. So that is the objective of the master plan. So as an objective, it needs to be ambitious. And I think that the principles that we're talking about, being happy, intelligent, sustainable, and resilient, I think that is something that we can all commit to, because there are objectives that are important for each one of the citizens. Of course, they are very generic objectives, but to start a master plan with a good idea, it's a good start. I would say that one of the most important things about the master plan, and I'm very happy to be here to finally discuss the master plan, I've been advocating for more than 15 years the urgent need for a master plan in Macau, and finally we have a master plan that we can discuss and that we can hopefully improve and implement on the coming years. So I think that the most important thing about the master plan is that this new government and the new chief executive committed to implement the master plan. So this tells us that the master plan is not just a study or is not just a document that is something that is going to really be implemented and will have an impact on the quality of life of people living in Macau. So I think that that is a very, very important change in paradigm from what we had before, which was a case by case, project by project, an urban development that was very fast, but that was not really controlled or not really holistic, to a master plan, to an urban development that is going to be driven by a master plan that has a clear vision.
Well, I mean, we're going to have to do that because we have these new reclaimed land segments which are growing and which we're going to really largely increase the size of Macau in and of itself. I mean, we're looking at going up to 36.8 square kilometers by 2040 in terms of the actual size of Macau. You've seen this growth, you've seen the step-by-step process. How did you see the growth of Macau before? I mean, being here from 2003, there was obviously a big boom and lots of construction. Was there any organization to that then?
I think that my first time in Macau was in 1997. I fell in love with the city, with the old part of the city. I thought that at that time the city was already a very beautiful place and a very interesting place to live in, and that's why I moved to Macau. But over the years, from 2003, there was an urban development and an economic development that was exponential, and that brought benefits for the general population. But in terms of urban development, was project by project. So there was no holistic view of the entire city. And this brought lots of problems. So we know the Siak Bai Wan case. So the government was developing the public housing area in Siak Bai Wan for 60,000 people, 10% of Macau population. And the same government at the same time was developing the LRT. And they left the LRT 1.3 kilometers away from the Siak Bai Wan housing estates. So this is one of the examples of what is the problem for this kind of lack of a master plan and coordination of projects. So now we need to create a new line to extend the old line that is going to be quite short, 1.3 kilometers, to reach Siak Bai Wan. So when I was living in Macau, I saw all this great development, and I saw lots of missed opportunities for synergy. One of the opportunities also was the new land reclamation projects. So there was a public consultation in 2012 about that project, and at that time the new land reclamation was an independent project. And one of the things that we were fighting for is to be able to coordinate the new development of the city with the existing city. So I think that it's very easy to look back and to see that the lack of planning created problems, and the lack of planning planning exacerbated some problems that the city already had. So I think that it's very easy to see that we really need to move for a new kind of development that is based on a master plan that can generate synergies and that can organize the entire territory in a coherent way. So one of the good things about the master plan is that finally we are looking at Macau as one thing. We are looking into Macau, Taipa, Coloane in an integrated way. So because this is an ecosystem that is interconnected, so we cannot just think about one part of the city. We need to be able to have the big picture. And the master plan allows us to have this kind of framework that we can see the entire city. We can plan for synergies between different areas, and then we can have also enough attention to each one of the detailed plans to further develop the local character and local idiosyncrasy of each one of the areas of Macau.
You know, it's interesting you mentioned that because they're breaking things into different segments. They not only have the zoning, so whether it's going to be industrial, commercial, residential, and so on and so forth, or mixed use, but they've also broken Macau down into various the various zones, right?
The detailed plans that will have 18 different zones that will have a detailed plan.
Right?
Exactly.
So those are very interesting because some of them, for example, Central Macau is divided into 3 zones, but then you have Cotai and Coloane, each being one zone instead of being several separate zones. I know that they can then be subdivided, but do you think that's going to happen?
I think that first, as a principle, the model of this master plan is to have an overall idea, an overall strategic vision, and then to organize smaller plans that will have much more detail. So we need to understand what is the structure of this master plan. To start with, it kind of makes sense because there are lots of projects that are already in place. We are not starting the city from scratch. So we need to pick up the different projects that are already happening, and we need to look into the character of the different zones, and we need then to organize the master plan. So the master plan is now done, and it has this kind of general objectives, key visions, key strategies for each one of the zones. And then it's organized zone by zone. And that zone, in this model of master plan, the detailed plan has a lot of impact because since the master plan is so vague, the detailed plan will then implement the key principles of the master plan, but will solve many things that are not solved at this moment. So the master plan, the good news is that we have a master plan that has a strategic vision. The bad news in that sense is that it's not enough to guarantee that the urban development will be successful because it relies on the quality of each one of the individual plans. So we cannot sit comfortable after doing the master plan because it will not have a very good impact if each one of the 18 individual plans are not well developed. Now, in terms of being 18 or 20, so I think that discussion, it's a discussion that we can have. I don't think that is the essential discussion for the master plan, but it's obvious that Coloane is just one area, and Coloane has different realities. Coloane is one of the areas in the plan that will have a big increase in terms of density. So we have the area next to the Coloane village that has housing that is planned for that area, which is a big increase. Siak Paivan also has a big increase. So these 18 areas in the peninsula, they are carefully crafted. When we move to Taipa, we have also several zones because there's already urban fabric there that supports that. When we move to Cotai and to Coloane, then it becomes a bit more generic. Also in Cotai, there is just one area that is called Cotai, but there's one industrial part closer to the airport that has a very different character from the Cotai strip. But I don't think that the 18 zones will make or break the plan. It's each individual project that is done, each individual detailed plan that will have a lot of impact on that specific area.
Well, I mean, they've been talking a lot recently for many years now about public housing. We need to have public housing. That has always been one of the key parts of what's going to be happening with Zone A and that type of development. But that's not the main thing that's the part of this plan. There is residential, but then they do a specific breakdown. They're going to have 23% going to public infrastructure, 22% residential, 13% tourism, and 8% for green areas or public spaces. Is any of those either too large a percentage or too small a percentage?
So I think that we cannot talk in a generic way because master plans, they need to really adapt to different realities. So for Macau, for the situation that we have in Macau, I think that we need more. So if you ask me, where do we need more? When we go out, of course, we need more green space. It's something that everyone in Macau feels like there's a big need for that. But I also think that because we're talking about the master plan, we need to develop the urban fabric of the city. And usually, good urban fabrics that promote quality of life, are urban fabrics that are kind of continuous and that have a big percentage of housing. So what I think is that we are not ambitious enough in terms of area for housing.
Okay.
Because our area is 20-something%, this means that we'll need to continue to invest on high density. It means that we need to continue the same model that we saw recently on public housing. And of course, Macau is small. Macau needs to have, needs to be a dense, in terms of housing, we need to have high density. But if we have more area for housing, we can have an urban fabric that reaches more parts and that becomes more continuous and not so much segmented. So what I would say is that I think that that scheme is a scheme that is logical. It's a scheme that is pretty much reading what is there and having a bit of tweak here or there. But I think that we need more green and we need more area for a normal urban fabric where people can just walk on the streets. That is what builds a city. I think that the problem of creating this new town development, which is areas that are very dense and disconnected from other areas, I think that is a problem. And I think that one of the big advantages and qualities of Macau and the urban fabric of Macau is that it's a very diverse but very continuous urban fabric. So we can go on the peninsula everywhere just walking. And I think it's important to keep the model of neighborhoods in the new land reclamation so that people feel like it's not I belong to zone A, which is a bit difficult, but I belong to Lilau, I belong to that small neighborhood. And I think that that is not yet there, and it needs to be, in my opinion, in the further stages.
Well, and also you're mentioning recreation. They're speaking of a high density area with also a lot of problems, such as flooding. We've got the inner harbor type of area, which they're now talking about trying to develop also into a recreational, leisure / commercial. But we've had various citizens that TDM has interviewed also saying, we don't understand this. We don't understand how this is possible. I know that you have done various projects. You've been doing a project for 7 years now that is specifically focused on coastlines and how to properly develop the coastlines. Given that, do you think that that project is possible in the way that it's been framed so far?
I think that the idea now is that the inner harbor is the heart of the city of Macau. It was the functional and historical harbor of the city. And with the creation of the outer harbor, the center of the city shifted. So the inner harbor was left unattended for many years. And a new bridge came with more traffic. Some high-rise buildings were built not following the regulations. So the inner harbor was unattended and it had a lot of pressure. Then the flooding. So the inner harbor was an area that was suffering for many, many years. Now on the master plan, we see that it's to keep the original urban fabric and to add one more function, which is commercial function on the waterfront. So this gives a possibility to think about the inner harbor in a different way. And I think that, again, it's a good idea to have another use on that part, because at this moment we have containers. At this moment, it's impossible to be on the waterfront. I work on that area. I'm there every day. It's fascinating. It's a beautiful area, but it's not a pleasant area for other people in the city. So it's not an asset for Macau citizens. So it's not possible to be on the waterfront or to have a coffee there or to just walk. So I think that it makes sense that we open the inner harbor for the local population on the inner harbor and also to the Macau population at large. And this would allow Macau population to know one of the areas that is that still has the original urban fabric, that we still have arcades, patios, we still have an urban fabric that is very small scale but full of alleys, and it's a really intricate and really unique part of the city. So I think that to open up the waterfront on that area it can help to create a positive impact on the inner harbor and it will help also the inner harbor to create a positive impact on the city. But it depends on how it's done.
Yes, exactly.
So that's why, again, there's the general idea that is a good idea. How will this be implemented will have a lot of impact if it's successful or not. So it's saying that they will have a flood prevention system. If that flood prevention system is the tidal barrier, it means that we don't need to create a wall on the inner harbor. But if it's not, and if we need to create a big wall along the inner harbor, that can be a big problem because it can go against this proximity that we're trying to increase between the city and the river. So that's why I think that the design solution for that principle, it's crucial for it to be successful or not successful. And that's why before I was mentioning that the master plan has general ideas, but does not have enough level of detail to guarantee that those ideas will be better implemented. So one of the things that we need to do to improve the master plan is on the law, because the document has three parts. One part is the presentation, one part is the law, and one part is the technical report. So on the law, in my opinion, we need to add qualitative indicators on each one of the zones. So meaning that we say that on the inner harbor, we want to create this beautiful boulevard. So in the law, we should state that more public space needs to be created on the inner harbor, that more green areas should be implemented on the inner harbor. So the master plan, because it's so generic, when we translate it for the indications for each one of the detailed plans, we should have a bit more detail to allow us to have quantitative qualitative indicators. So the team that will develop that, they know that they need to create more public space, that they need to create more green space. So if that is not there, it can happen or it cannot happen. But if it's on the master plan, that is something that they need to apply.
Well, it will be in the law.
Exactly.
What about timetables? I mean, we're looking at 2020 to 2040. Obviously, we had a very specific timetable for the LRT, which was not followed in any way, shape, or form. Do you think that we need to be attaching timetables also onto the development of these districts, or to specific projects in and of themselves, such as the waterfront?
The timeline is important. I think that the model of this master plan is a bit generic at this moment. So I don't think that this is a master plan that will need to tell us exactly that we do zone 1, 2, 3 in a sequence. But I think that we need to have at least a criteria so that we understand how is that going to be developed. Because it's very different to do all the areas at the same time or to do them by clusters. And these areas, they touch other areas. So either they are done at the same time with a lot of coordination, or we need to do one zone and then do the other zone so that we can connect them in a holistic way. So I think that it's important to understand how the project is going to be, how the master plan is going to be implemented. And I think that because this is a master plan that starts generic, the quality of the projects is quite important. So we need to really do the first one very well. Otherwise, the population will not trust this process. So I think that the timing, the sequence of projects is also crucial for the success of this master plan.
Speaking of the population, they do have a chance right now to voice their opinion in terms of what they think about this plan. Do you think that people are going to go out there and actually study the plan and then give their opinions?
I think that the plan has one part that is easier to look into. That is the presentation, the law part, and then the technical part. So I think that the master plan was done by the government. So while it was being produced by the government, it was their project. But now it's being open to the entire population. So I think that now we, the Macau population, need to take ownership of the master plan and need to try to improve it. So my advice is that each one of us, citizens, associations, universities, they should look into the master plan and they should try to improve the master plan. And that is our responsibility as civic society. So we should try to improve that master plan, because it will be very important for our future.
It's our plan.
Exactly, it's our plan. After that, then the government will need to incorporate, hopefully, the wise ideas and the wise comments from the population. In my opinion, we need to understand the master plan as a process, and it needs to, so there was a team organizing it, and now we have all the wisdom in Macau to look into this master plan and to try to make it better. And I think that we need to do it. We need to look and we need to be practical, trying to go for improvements on the master plan. And after that, the government needs to finalize and to really create a better master plan, and then they need to commit to implement it. Because without that commitment to implement this will not be successful.
I know that for myself, I found a couple things that I found surprising. One of the residential zones in Koloan, the former Alto de Koloan, the commercial zone in Taipa, they're in front of the Art Regency Hotel being zoned as commercial. Did you find anything surprising within the plan?
I think that this plan is quite pragmatic. So it picks up problems that existed before, like the LRT, and it solves the problem. So before the plan was not, in terms of the LRT, was not convincing on the peninsula, and they've removed it. So I think it is a very pragmatic project. And now they're also talking about removing Zone D from the master
which is
plan.
quite big. I mean, even in terms of visually. We've seen what's happened with the other zone, which has been growing there, I think it's Zone E. And it's quite visible. Every single day you're going by on the bridge and you see tons and tons of sand being dumped into the water. Can you imagine? Zone D is another 59 hectares.
Yes. So so again, in terms of what can we do, how can we improve the master plan? What are those things that that concern me? So that area, the new land reclamation, like it or dislike it, was planned as an archipelago. So to turn Macau into an archipelago, to increase the waterfront. So I understand that there's this issue of the Chinese government having approved an increase of area. So of course the Macau government now had the good idea of creating a reclamation between Zone A and the existing city. And that is very important because it will create a park on that area of the city, a big green park that we don't have in Macau, and will also better connect the area. But because of that, it's over the area that was approved by the Chinese government. So I think that part of that discussion has to do with maintaining what was previously agreed with China. But my opinion is that we need to be careful not to treat the new land reclamation as a case-by-case project. So if we're talking about the master plan, in my opinion, it's more coherent that we keep it. Of course, we need to coordinate this with China. But that area is a good example that even if we don't need at this moment, we are working for a plan of about 800,000 people.
Yeah, 808,000 people by
2040.
2040, yeah.
And this is the only scenario. This might increase. We might reach closer to 1 million. So it's kind of wise to think that we need to have different scenarios and we need to have room for expansion. So that area, Zone D, can be one of these areas for expansion. And if we build it sooner, we can use it as a temporary usage for parks, as a green area that is not built up as a piece of the city, but that adds value to the city. And later on, if we need to increase, then we can increase. I think that it's better to integrate these things on the plan from the beginning. So one of the things that is missing on this plan is the expansion, the potential to expand the plan. We have a big maritime area that we are not touching. We have this,
and there's virtually no mention of it. Within the plan itself, they say that they want to promote the maritime economy of Macau and the Greater Bay Area, create commercial streets and have disaster prevention, but that's all that they mention about the 85 square kilometers that
exactly,
we have
and we're talking about 2020 to 2040, so there's 20 years. It's a long time, but so the master plan cannot just stay there. The master plan needs to have areas for future expansion. So the maritime area is one area that I think that is really underdeveloped on this project. The other one is the relation with Hanking. Politically, we have lots of informations that we'll have a neighborhood of Macau in Hanking, but this is not clearly mentioned on the master plan, and that will be an important area. Other thing that is also missing on the master plan at this moment is to acknowledge that we have in Macau a local population and we have tourists. And per year,
only 40 million per year.
Close to 40 million. That means that per day we have about 100,000 people that are not Macau residents on the streets. So 1 in every 7 people that we see on the street will be a tourist. So it's also important to understand that this master plan will need to manage these different populations. And we're talking about tourists and we're talking about local population. And there are different interests, there are points of clash. So this is also something that we need to pay attention to. And again, this needs to, we don't need to focus immediately on what is the solution for this problem, but we need to acknowledge that this is an issue, and this issue should be understood and should be framed also on the master plan. But I think that in terms of other things on the master plan that we need to improve, and I think that we also need to talk about, this is the heritage.
Yes.
So the master plan has some ideas about the heritage, the visual corridors, which are good ideas. And they say in many areas of the master plan that they want to promote the local identity and preserve the historical culture of Macau. But it's important that we increase our heritage lists because the heritage list, we have UNESCO, but besides UNESCO, the list is very short and is not really representative of the architectural history and quality that we have in Macau. We don't have patio houses, we don't have Chinese vernacular houses, we don't have Art Deco, we don't have modernist buildings, we don't have arcades. So that heritage list is good, what is there should be protected, but we really need to increase it. If we don't increase it, the master plan will not help us to preserve heritage. So the master plan will also need to be well coordinated with the other plans. One is the heritage law, and the other one is the redevelopment of the old neighborhoods.
Yes.
This law will take place, will start to be implemented soon. And that law is stating that buildings that are over 40 years, if 80% of the owners agree, they can be demolished and redeveloped. And it states that if the building is in ruin, 60% of the owners agree the building can be demolished. This means that in the inner harbor, most patio houses are in really bad shape, and they are not protected. So under the urban renewal law, they might be demolished if 60% of the owners agrees. So again, the master plan needs to be well tied in with the renewal of the old neighborhoods and with the heritage law in order to preserve the heritage that we still have that is not yet acknowledged as heritage. So the instruments that are on the plan, they are interesting, like the view corridors, but the list that is behind that, it's really insufficient. So if we really want to preserve the buildings that we see in the city and if we want to improve them, we need to quickly increase the heritage list of Macau. And 10 buildings per year is really not enough. This will give us in 10 years 100, which is ridiculous given the quality and the richness of the architecture, traditional architecture that we have in Macau.
And how quickly they can disappear. I mean, Macau is meant to be, they mention it specifically, Macau as predominantly Chinese, but also multicultural. And that's one of their main points for tourism, is the fact that we have had the history that Macau has had, the multicultural history, which is represented within the buildings themselves. And if they get torn down, then
and what is happening is that, because at this moment several pieces are coming together. We have a master plan, we have the heritage law, we have the old neighborhoods redevelopment. So what is happening is, if this is implemented quickly, we'll see a big demolishing on the old fabric, which is the opposite of what the master plans want to achieve. So that's why it's very important that the master plan is well coordinated with the other laws and with the other projects, so that we can really achieve the spirit of this master plan, which is to preserve local identity. So in order to do that, it's very important that the detailed plan for each one of the areas really tries to protect to the maximum the amazing heritage that we have on each one of those areas. And in that case, we can turn a problem, which is the lack of heritage that is preserved, into an opportunity to really on each one of the plans to really protect a lot what is there. So I think I'm voicing this because we have a problem and we have also an opportunity. If we just implement the law as is, many of these buildings will be demolished. If we are careful to give enough instruments on the detailed plan areas to preserve them, then we can end up with a list that is much more representative of this wonderful hybrid history that we have.
And we have many laws being passed every year also, which will directly impact what is happening in terms of the urban structure of Macau. This plan is said to be reviewed, the urban master plan is said to be reviewed every 5 years. Is that timing appropriate, or should it be shortened or lengthened?
We have a master plan for 20 years, so this will have 4 revisions. For this length, it's kind of adequate to have this sequence of 5 years. This is a master plan. The master plan has general principles and a strategic vision for the city. It really depends on each one of the other detailed plans to implement. So I think that is wise every 5 years to go through reviewing the plan. Some interventions will be successful, some will not, and we'll be able to always improve. So I think that sequence is to make the plan better and more adapted to the local conditions that will change and that will evolve over time. So it's wise to have a master plan that is a process plan and not an image plan. And I think that a lot of the discussion that we have is that the people usually look into a master plan as an overall image of the city that needs to be built exactly like that. Yeah. This master plan is not like that. And in a city like Macau, it's not really possible, or it's not really desirable to have a master plan that is an image and then we just need to build it, because this city is quite vibrant, it's quite dynamic. And we need to be able to adjust and to improve over time. So I think that we need to see these 5 years, every 5 years, as a possibility to improve. So now we have this problem of the LRT that is just on the periphery of the city, right? So the government was maybe not very happy with the plan on the peninsula, and the problem of the LRT on the peninsula had many, many problems, was not really a convincing system. But we are left with a peninsula that does not have a very solid public transportation system. Yeah. So on the short term, we need to do something. We need to create bus routes around the peninsula and on the central axis that will be much more efficient. But on the long term, we really need to see and we need to rethink if we can have, if we can study and get to a proposal for the LRT that would then be much better integrated to serve the local population in the peninsula. So I think that we can see and we should look into these revisions every 5 years as a way to improve the plan. So we shouldn't try to just keep it as is now. We should, now we need to make the best we can. But 5 years from now, we should look into it to see, how can we do this better? And the other 5 years, we have this, how can we make it even better? And I think that the possibility of having the revision every 5 years gives us this chance to continuously improve the plan.
Well, at least we have a starting point for now. Unfortunately, time has completely flown. Thank you so much for being with us, and we have to have you back to talk about the wealth of other areas that you were also involved in. Thank you very much for your time.
It was a great pleasure.
That's all for this week. Join us again next week for more TDM Talk Show. Good night.